Good evening and welcome to the regular meeting of the Edina Planning Commission for September 25, 2013. My name is Kevin Staunton. I'm the chair of the commission. Jackie, would you please call the roll?
Here.
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 Here. Here.
Here. Here.
Here. Thank you. Next on the agenda is approval of the meeting agenda. Are there any additions or modifications or subtractions from the meeting agenda? Seeing none, I'd take a motion to approve the meeting agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. The meeting agenda is approved. Next up is approval of the consent agenda. The only item on the consent agenda this evening is the minutes of the regular meeting of the Edina Planning Commission for September 11, 2013. Are there any revisions or comments, changes to those minutes? Hearing none, I would take a motion to approve the consent agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. The consent agenda is approved. Next up on the agenda is the community comment portion of the agenda. This is the place on the agenda where we give members of the community an opportunity to comment on items that are not before us this evening. We ask that you come to one of the microphones, introduce yourself by name and address, and take up to 3 minutes to share a comment with us. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to comment during the community comment portion of the meeting? Seeing none, I would take a motion to close community comment.
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Next up on the agenda is the public hearings section of the agenda, and we have one item on the public hearings for the on the agenda this evening, and it is a preliminary plat AKARE Companies for 5820 Brookview Avenue. Carrie?
Thank you, Chair Staunton, members of the Commission. I believe most of you are familiar with this neighborhood. We've had some subdivisions proposed in this neighborhood in the last few years. Properties in the 5800 block of Brookview Avenue, just north of Pamela Park. You see the oversized parcel compared to the neighborhood, highlighted in blue. There's currently a single-family home and a detached garage located on the property. The subdivision that the Planning Commission reviewed and approved on this block was right across the street. You can see some of the construction that's taking place. A similar proposal as the one before you this evening. There's a look at the existing. You see the existing house is located on the north half of this lot, and the detached garage located on the south. So the applicant is proposing to split this property into two lots. Each would be 50 feet in width. They would remove the existing structures on the property and construct two new single-family homes. As you recall, I think I've got a graphic here. This area was originally platted with 50-foot wide lots. This is the original plat for this neighborhood. As we've experienced with some of these areas, people elected to combine two 50-foot wide lots and construct one home. And so that's the circumstance of this property. So the request before the Planning Commission is a subdivision to create two lots out of the one existing lot. Lot width variances from 75 feet to 50 feet for each lot, and lot area variances from 9,000 square feet to 6,700 square feet for each lot. Again, minimum lot size here, the minimum lot size in Edina is 9,000 square feet and 75 feet in width. You recall anything in neighborhoods where lots are primarily over that size, it becomes the median of all the lots within 500 feet of that area. This is an area where all the lots are smaller than that, so that's the standard. So the graphic on the screen, highlighted in red, is the lot size requirements. Again, 9,000 square feet, 75 feet in width, and 134 feet in depth. So the variances are requested for lot area, lot width for both lots. The applicant ran the median calculations for a comparison, and as you see, they're very close. They would meet the medians for lot width, 50 feet and 134 feet in depth. The median is just slightly over the 6,711 square feet. And again, there's the required plats. Just to give you a quick rundown history of subdivisions within this area, within the last 6 or 7 years, as you see here, we've considered 6 subdivisions, somewhat similar to what's before us this evening. 3 have been approved. They're the ones highlighted in yellow. This one, number 1 over here, that's that 4-lot subdivision on France. 2 of the lots have been built, and there's 2 right on France. I believe 1 is under construction now. The one right across the street is highlighted in number 4. And then there was another one on Oak Lawn, just to the south, over about a block and a half, where it was similar to the circumstance here. The last home that was a 100-foot wide lot requested to be split into 250s on that block. On the south side of Pamela Park on Brookview, the Planning Commission and Council have considered 3 variances that were denied. Within these neighborhoods to the south, there's more of a mixture of larger lots and smaller lots. And for those reasons, those subdivisions were denied. So the primary issue before the Planning Commission are the variance findings for the subdivision met. And again, there are typical standards. Will the proposal relieve practical difficulties that prevent a reasonable use on the property? Are there circumstances that are unique and not common to similarly zoned properties? And will the variance alter the essential character of the neighborhood? In this case, staff believes that the variance findings are met. Again, this area was originally platted with 50-foot wide lots. In denying the subdivision, the applicant would be denied reasonable use of the property when compared to this neighborhood. Again, you see all the 50-foot wide lots to the north and south on the west side of Brookview. Again, the property just to the east was the subdivision that was approved back in 2011. The oversized lot is unique to the neighborhood. It's the last 100-foot wide lot on this block. There are a couple of 75-foot wide lots here at 5809 and 5817. So a 50-foot wide lot would not be out of character in the neighborhood. So with that, staff is recommending approval of the subdivision subject to the findings and conditions in your staff report. The conditions include watershed district approval, all curb cut permits and necessary utility connections subject to the city engineer's approval, and then specific grading plans would be approved as part of individual building permits on that property. So with that, I can stand for questions.
Thank you, Carrie. Any questions for Carrie on this item? All right, thanks. Is the applicant present? Why don't you come on up, introduce yourself. What I'd recommend is that you come to one of the side podiums unless you've got something that you want to display, and tell us your name and address and tell us about your project.
My name is Robert Eldridge, and I'm with A-Care Companies, doing business as Ridge Creek Custom Homes. Our address is 4820 West 77th Street, Suite 125 in Edina. Welcome, Mr. Eldridge. Thank you. Well, we are proposing to do a lot subdivision. Carrie had done a great job with his report. I actually had a PowerPoint presentation, and he had everything that I had in mind, so I don't like to be redundant and go through the same information over and over again. But we are proposing to build 2 homes in the neighborhood. We have done work in the area, and actually one of the lots that Carrie talked about on France Avenue, we're the builder that's building that home that's going up right now. One of the things that I enjoy in Edina is the diversity in housing, and also too, these smaller lots afford more buyers. When you get into the 100 and the 120-foot wide lots, that usually pushes the price point over $1 million, upwards of close to $2 million, and that limits your buyers and limits people being able to come in and enjoy the good schools and the great neighborhoods. We are currently did a project at 5928 Wooddale Avenue that's in the Parade of the Homes right now, and that's on a 50-foot lot that was a simple tear down and rebuild. And that's very, that home is very similar to what we would be looking at proposing here too with the building officials. So again, Carrie did such a great job. I didn't think it was necessary for me to show you all the same information over again. If there's any other specific questions you have for me, I'd be happy to answer them.
Sure. Thank you for your thoughtfulness with our time. Any questions for Mr. Eldridge? We're a slow to warm up group.
That's all right. That's
Thank
all
you.
right.
We stick around. We may have questions for
Definitely.
you as it proceeds.
All right. Thank you very much.
This is a public hearing, so I want to take the opportunity at this time to open the public hearing and invite members of the public who would like to comment on this application to come forward. And same drill, if you'd come to one of those side podiums, introduce yourself, tell us your name and address, and you'll have up to 3 minutes to share your thoughts with us. There are some lights on the podium, and when it gets to yellow, that means it's time to wrap up, and red is the end of your 3 minutes. So anyone who'd like to comment on this would be the time to come forward.
Good evening. I am John Peterson, mentioned on the first line of your proposal. My wife Sheila, here, and I have lived in this house for 44 years. We bought it in 1969. Excuse me. We bought the house to raise our family. Who cares if it's a 100-foot lot in 1969? It's a garden, a dog, a swing, a place to play. Pamela Park was a swamp then, and it was filled after the point that we moved in. But now we are in our mid-70s, and it's time for us to downsize, and this is part of our proposal. We have contemplated this move for several years. One choice would be to sell as is, and number two would be to give it to our kids. And in parts of that, we looked at a building inspector, Matt Brown, as a matter of fact, who came in and went through our house, and we said, "Will you please look it over as if you're representing a buyer?" We knew where all the warts were, and he simply amplified them, and said, "Well, where would we start with money?" He said, "We could start with $50,000. Well, that took us out of that ballpark in a real hurry. So replacing the house is our best option. I think it's the city's best option. To get new families in and new kids in the block as part of the evolution is concerned. We've reached that decision. And there are many developers in Edina. They're all over the place, as you all know. One person contacted us and we were not ready to make a move at that time. So we searched around and we found a person we think represents what we want to do, Rob Eldridge, and we support his plans. So thank you, and any questions? Yes. Excuse me.
Any questions for Mr. Peterson? Thank you, Mr. Peterson.
Great.
Other comments on the application before the commission?
Good evening. My name is George Reichert. I'm 93 years old, and I live next door to John Peterson. I've lived in this house for 60 years, and 40 years ago, the Petersons moved in, and I couldn't have had a more beautiful relationship with the Petersons. They've been just great for me. They've had me over for dinner time and time again. They've brought me nice presents, and I can only say, thank God for the Petersons. They've been just great. And a few weeks ago, I met the contractor, Rob, and we talked a bit about the Petersons and about their unit being separated into two 50-foot lots. And I thought that was a great experience for the Petersons and also for me, because just about 3 years ago, they tore down an old house at the end of the block and built the first new home I was so impressed. I just couldn't imagine anything nicer. And a couple years later, the same thing happened across the street from the new house. 2 new homes went up from a 100-foot lot that was split in 2. Now the neighborhood looked so beautiful. I was proud to have somebody over. And now when I talked to Rob, he wanted to know what I thought of the idea. I told him that was just great because of all the changes that have happened. I couldn't be more impressed with what is going to happen to the house next to me. I just hope that I live long enough to see it come to fruition. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reichert. It's hard to imagine that anyone could make the Petersons at 40 years in the neighborhood seem like the newbies.
Good evening. My name is John Reichert. I'm George Reichert's son. I live on 51st and Indianola, so I'm very familiar with homes that have been taken down and new ones that have been built, because most every home on my block has been either modified or taken down and new ones being built. I had a chance to meet with Rob at the Petersons' home about 3 months ago when we were talking about this project, and I was very impressed with the homes that he had built. I've gone through the home that he built on Wooddale. His attention to detail is superlative, and I think he's going to be taking a lot of the ideas that he put in that home in Wooddale and bringing it to the Brookview neighborhood. I happen to be in the real estate business. I've been in residential real estate with Edina Realty for 34 years. You might have seen my name around town. I think from a value standpoint, the buildings that are going to be proposed and built by Rob and his team will help the neighborhood values in Brookview Avenue, which I know is going to be very helpful to Dad and the rest of the people that live on Brookview Avenue. The site sits up on a little hill, so you'll have a wonderful sense of arrival as you come into the 2 new homes that are being built. And I think they're going to, again, add a lot of value to the neighborhood, and I highly endorse the project. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Reichert.
Hi, I'm Jan Story. I'm at 5825 Brookview Avenue, so directly across from the Petersons. I wanted to just express my support for the project, for Rob, and for what the Petersons are doing. I had the opportunity to live next to the last split that was on our block, and it was a great experience. We have brand new neighbors, 2 sets of neighbors. It was one house at a time, and even though it seems like it's a long time during the process, when it's really all over, what you end up with is a great new addition to the neighborhood. And we've been talking with the Petersons for a while about looking at how they wanted to approach this and who they wanted to go with. And I know that the Petersons have done a ton of research to find exactly the right person to take the project on, and I think they found the right person, and we trust them and we fully support this project.
Thank you, Ms. Story. Other comments? Seeing no further comments, I'd entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Is there a second? Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, so the public hearing is closed, and we'll move the discussion back to the Planning Commission. Are there questions for staff or for the applicant or comments from planning commissioners? Commissioner Fisher.
I'd like to just ask Carrie a question. Carrie, we've reviewed 6 of these over the last several years. 3 of them were approved. I think more than 3 were approved by the Planning Commission, correct?
I believe that you're right about that, yes.
So
These are just the final actions by council.
But regardless whether it was a Planning Commission or the council that did not approve them, the sense is that the differentiator was really the context, that there were more larger or odd-shaped lots in the general area.
Correct.
That was really
in
the only
areas
difference.
where there were the denials, that's true.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I think most of us, with the exception of Commissioner Carr, perhaps, have lived through some of these. Maybe Commissioner Platter and Commissioner Potts might be new to these, but you've done. Further discussion. Commissioner Fisher.
Well, I think my track record would suggest that I, in this circumstance, like the idea of being able to split these 100-foot lots. I think it adds a lot of value, and I think there were some really thoughtful comments to that effect here, and the positive things that it can do for the neighborhood. So if it's okay, I would just move approval of the variance request with all the staff recommendations and subject to the conditions listed.
Is there a second? Further discussion on the motion? Commissioner Grable.
I think it was appropriate, or it was very interesting that some of the comments we heard tonight expressed the positive things that do result when you add a couple new houses to a neighborhood, bringing in new families to a neighborhood, and sometimes I think we overlook that.
Commissioner Forrest.
I'm not necessarily averse to the subdivision. I'm averse to the variances because, and it's not reflective on this particular project. It's just in general the process. I think we need to decide as a city if we want this to be done as a rule or not. Regarding our precedent, the requirement is that each property that's considered for a variance has a practical difficulty that is unique to that property, and that's why generally it's said you don't consider the precedent in making these decisions. When these lots were platted, they were platted for homes that are smaller than what we build these days. And as far as the owner not being able to use this property like everybody else, they can use it there. They can build a home on it. It's a reasonable use. They have no trouble building a home on this property. If they own two smaller lots, they could build two homes on them. I think it's really unfortunate that we have this muddy thing we have to go through every time, but I think it's also unfortunate, not necessarily in this block, but in some neighborhoods where people move into a neighborhood and they think that things will that the lots will be remaining pretty much the same, or they think they move next to a place where there's more room between the houses, and that's why they bought that particular house. So it would be nice to have our code reflect one way or the other what our preferences are, so that our residents can know, when they purchase a home, that it's not going to be dramatically changed the next day, and which is kind of the whole purpose of the zoning code, is to identify what goes where and how things are used. So I'm not averse to the subdivision, but I have trouble with the variances, and I'm just saying this because I want that on the record. I think we need to get some guts and the city and figure out what do we really want here, rather than using a variance process for a tool when it's not a hardship in my mind to be able to build a house on property.
Well, I'll just chime in by saying there's enough of us who've had experience with these. I think we've all figured out where we are on these various cases that come in front of us. Having just looked at a 100-foot lot with a new house on it that was not split into two pieces earlier today, I can tell you that I think that the character of the neighborhood will be better preserved by having two 50-foot lots than having a 100-foot lot, because the marketplace as it exists today would drive a very large house that would be very expensive, and I don't think it would be consistent with what you see in that neighborhood. So I'm in favor in this situation of granting a variance to make sure that the future build out of this area is consistent with the character of the neighborhood. So I intend to vote in favor of it, and I want to commend the Petersons on the thought that they've put into securing a developer to sell to that will be mindful of the neighbors. And it sounds like there's been a lot of good communication in the neighborhood to make sure that what does go in there is done in a way that tries to fit in with neighboring homes. And it sounds like there's been some success in this area as we've gone along the way. So glad to see it. Further comments? All right, hearing none, I would ask Jackie, let's call the roll on this.
Aye.
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 Aye. Commissioner Platiger.
Aye.
Commissioner Forrest.
Nay.
Commissioner Grable.
Aye.
Chair Scott.
Aye. Thank you and congratulations, and good luck as you move forward. Actually, would this be a recommendation of the council? Okay, so this will go to the city council. Be in touch with Planner Teague, and he will give you the information on when you'll expect to have it in front of the city council. All right, so next up on the agenda is Section 7, Reports and Recommendations. The first item is sketch plan for 3655 Hazleton Road.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Members of the Commission, I think you're all very familiar with this site. This is the Szechuan Star site. It's the old restaurant that's sat vacant on Hazleton Road and the Promenade. It's just adjacent to the Byerly's redevelopment project that's going on. It's an aerial look at the site. You can see the existing restaurant that's been vacant for a number of years now, the existing Byerly's. What the applicant is considering here is to put a bank with a drive-through on the site. A couple of pictures here of example buildings that they've done elsewhere. This is a 2-story example, and then another 1-story. What we'll be looking at this evening is they've provided 3 alternatives, potential site layouts. This is a use that's permitted in this zoning district, as is the drive-through. 2 of the 3 site plans require variances for the building setback, and one of the alternatives is code compliant. It meets all of our setback and parking requirements. So I'll just move quickly through, and then the applicant can share some additional thoughts and what they were thinking here. As staff worked with the applicant here, moving forward, we encouraged trying to provide pedestrian connections and connections to the promenade, to Hazleton Road, connections to the development. As you see here, in providing those connections, oftentimes we have to cross a parking lot in order to get there. But so this is alternative A. The area highlighted in yellow requires the variance. The dashed line is the required setback, which in this case is 50 feet on all sides. So they've brought the building up close to that access road that is being built as part of the Byerly's redevelopment project. This is the roundabout on Hazleton that would be going in. And you can see the drive-through would cycle in and then face the promenade and then cycle back out. Just a couple of renderings of what that site plan would look like. You can see the promenade here, Hazleton Road, the roundabout, then that access drive. So you can see some of those pedestrian connections from the promenade crossing the parking lot. This would be the 2-story version. And you see the drive-through. The second alternative, this is the code compliant drive-through, essentially in the same location. The building has been shifted down and toward the promenade in order to meet that 50-foot setback. In doing that, extension of the parking extends up toward Hazleton. But again, this is a code compliant option. So just to take a look at what that would look like. This is from the cul-de-sac, so you can see the parking. Taken from the promenade. Again, that that second story mezzanine. that would overlook the promenade. And then the third alternative is essentially the same as the first one that we looked at, with the exception that the drive-through would drive in toward the bank and then cycle out. So it's just a shifting of the drive-through. So with that, that concludes my presentation as part of the sketch plan review. Again, these are non-binding comments that you would provide the applicant on some of these alternatives. With that, I can answer any questions, or the applicant can come up and present any additional information.
Questions for Carrie? Commissioner Platter.
Why is this, since there are code compliant things here, why isn't for sketch plan? Just curious, or what's the reason?
Yeah, they didn't have to go that route. They could have submitted a site plan, but they had some different alternatives that they were throwing about, so they wanted to get that feedback before they really spent a lot of investment in creating the site plan.
So they could have brought in one of these that met everything.
They could have.
Correct, right now? Okay.
Commissioner Potts.
Carrie, did I say, are all three of these two-story versions?
I believe they are, yes.
Okay, and is there a couple of questions about signage? Is the signage accurate in terms of what we allow as it was shown on these?
They didn't necessarily, with this, we did take just a general look at the signage, and we do have a code provision that says signage can't face a public park. We've had some exceptions to that. So whether this actually faces the promenade, maybe not, kind of faces to the south, but as far as the size goes, the signs would be code compliant.
Is any pylon sign allowed, or monument sign?
They could have a monument sign as well.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Platter and then Commissioner Carr.
So the size of the sign is only the think, it's not including the blue wall?
It would just be the think.
Even though that appears to be a branding / sign element for them?
Yeah, we would draw a box around the think.
Okay.
Commissioner Carr.
And just in looking at these various sketch plans, it appears as though on the two that require a variance, the parking is all on the promenade section, whereas the one that actually fits in the site, the required setbacks, the parking is actually primarily located on Hazleton Road and on the other end. I'm not sure if that's the south end. South end.
The south end, right.
So, I don't know if we have any preference from a city planning perspective to have less parking along the promenade, but my thought would be, just in looking at this at first glance, that would be preferable to have the parking on Hazleton and the south side rather than facing the promenade.
Yeah, that was staff's first inclination too, was to try to pull the building up to the promenade. But I think for the drive-through and being able to cycle through the site, that's the reason for the alternatives that you see here, where really each one of these alternatives has parking right along the promenade.
Each one has parking, but it appears as though for the one that fits in the required setbacks, that most of the parking is not facing, the majority of the parking is facing north and south rather than towards the promenade, which appears to be east.
Correct. Where I was thinking is you wouldn't have any parking along the promenade, and it would be green space with the building on that side.
Which is not one of the alternatives.
That's not one of the
I see
alternatives.
what you're saying. It's
right.
not one that's shown.
Right.
Okay, that would be that would be preferable, I would think. Thank you.
All right, seeing no further comments or questions for staff, I'd ask the applicant to come forward, introduce yourself, and tell us about the project.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, I'm Jeff Flipson with HTG Architects. Our address is 9300 Hennepin Town Road, Eden Prairie.
Welcome, Mr. Flipson.
Thank you. The three options that were submitted in discussions with Carrie and Wayne Hoole we talked about options, and because of the promenade, the discussion is where should the building be positioned, and then because of Hazleton. And we are happy with option B that complies. So we're not here trying to push option C or D. If the members of the commission here prefer option B, we could stop right now and I won't wait for the red light. But we like the idea from a circulation standpoint of option B, where we separate out the drive-up traffic from the customer parking on the north side of the building in option B. Our client has said and offered, and again in discussions with the staff, the parking lots can be used by people that want to use the promenade in the evenings or on weekends. So the links that were shown on the plan was for that rationale, that we could get people to come in to the bank's parking lot and have easy access to and from the parking lots. One of the options, I can't remember which one, is we could possibly take these on option B, take the link from the promenade, and we could move that all the way south along the south property line, and that would eliminate people crossing through the parking lots. So if that would be a preference for the commission. The second story, you saw on one of the images, there was a little patio, a green space. And so we were trying to tie, instead of just having a massive two-story building, again, it's not massive, but having some connection with the promenade, a little patio up on the second floor of the building. You may have seen that in the rendering, that ties to the promenade. We will try to use sustainable materials whenever possible in the building. And the signage will comply. We will follow whatever signage ordinance. And you can have a pylon sign 20 feet tall with 100 square feet of signage on each side. You can have, or 200 square feet. You can only have time and temp on the pylon sign if they do a message center, but Think generally does not do a message center. So I guess I'm here now at this point to answer questions, because Carrie did a nice job explaining. But if our standpoint, if option B is okay with the people here, we're fine with that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Flipson. Questions for Mr. Flipson? Commissioner Grable.
Why would you in options A and C position the building so most of the parking's next to the promenade? Why not reverse it so that the building is closest to the promenade and the parking is on the west side of the site? I mean, I can't think of something that at least I would like less than something like this next to the promenade.
In option A, if we slid the building all the way over to the right or to the east, the drive-up won't work because we need counterclockwise access to get to the drive-up. So if you look at the plan, if we slid the building over, the cars that are in the drive-up would have nowhere to turn around and go south. The thought of option A was that if members of the commission or even the council would say we'd prefer to have the building farther away from the promenade, that's why we came up with an option A. And option B, again, is kind of centering the building and getting more of the parking to the north and south.
Commissioner Potts.
Question about the parking count. From the point of view of just operating the bank, do you need that many parking spots?
No. But that count is what complies. And
right.
we added a few more, again, not knowing if the commission would say, it'd be nice to have parking for people to use to go up and down, when they go on the promenade. So we quite honestly would prefer less than even 42 parking stalls or the 47 that we have listed.
Sure. I mean, in the spirit of sketch plan and making comments like this, speaking for myself, I'd welcome a variance request for fewer parking stalls and more green space for
all right.
A situation like this.
even then in option B, again, from a count standpoint, the 8 or 9 parking stalls on the southernmost end of the property on the south side of the drive-up, we could take those out, show proof of parking, that we could always add them in the future, and now you have all your less parking, but it's up near the building. So that would be, we would be fine with that.
Commissioner Scheer.
Mr. Flipson, I wonder if you could do something for me. You made a statement in your presentation about another option would be to move all the way to the south, eliminate crossing through the parking lots. Do we have a drawing you could put up? I'm having trouble envisioning, and you could show us at all what that would look like?
In fact, I'm sorry, I just pulled up my options here. If you look at option B,
yes,
along the south property line, there's a sidewalk there. So I misspoke. The option B shows a link right from the promenade going along the south property line over towards the access road towards Byerly's. So we would have a sidewalk that wouldn't have to cross any parking or drive lanes. Then as opposed on the north side of option B, you see.
C? It's option C, I think, I'm being told.
Oh, then I may have it.
Okay.
Hold on. Oh, yes, you are correct. I had a newer version here. I'm sorry.
You know what might be helpful, Mr. Flipson, is if we could we have an overhead projector on the center podium there.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can lay that map out, then you can kind of trace where that pedestrian traffic would go. If you just pull the keyboard out of the way there, and you can kind of illustrate that so that everybody can be on the same page.
All right. In this option, this one shows, this is option B, but we've added some green space on it, and along the southern property line is where we were showing a possible sidewalk versus having it cross on I can't remember which option. It might have been one here, but this seems to make a cleaner sidewalk.
And when you were talking about the removal of parking spaces in response to one of the other, those are there? Okay.
Right. I believe there's 9 there.
Okay.
Yes. And so that could become a nice green space. Think Mutual Bank they're a great client because they're very sensitive to their surroundings. And we don't show it here, but if the staff is willing to have discussions, maybe on this southern corner here, we'd be willing to put benches or something, so if people are on the promenade, they could take a break. And again, try to tie that link between the promenade and this site a little bit more. And it's as simple as a couple benches here. I don't know if in this center area, if we'd want to put a little plaza of sorts with a trellis that, I don't know why people would go and sit there, but again, we're open to discussions with staff on trying to create that link as simple and as nice as possible.
Well, in the spirit of also sketch plan review, I would state that the more green space, the better. I also would support less parking. If you're in bank parking lots lately, there's so many people that don't come to the bank anymore. I think we could do with a little less parking. I am concerned, and I'm trying to grapple with the idea of what is up against that promenade. I would want there to be very significant landscaping in most of these designs that you're showing us this evening.
And we're willing to do that and have maybe more of the openings where the sidewalks are, and then in the middle area make it more dense with a combination of taller overhang, canopy trees, smaller bushes, lower bushes. Yes, again, at this stage, because it's a sketch plan review, we haven't even done a landscaping plan other than this conceptual plan, but we'd be willing to do that.
And I have to ask one last question. I thought the idea of Think Mutual Bank was just hypothetical. And from your comment a minute ago, is there really such a bank?
Yes.
You really have this client?
Yes.
I was unaware of their existence. Thank you.
They've been around. I see the red light, so you can kick me out of here, but they used to be what was called IBM Credit Union out of Rochester. And then they became Think Credit Union, and 5 years ago sometime they went from Think Credit Union to Think Mutual Bank. So they've been in history, they've been around 60, 70 years.
Commissioner Schroeder.
Well, I have a few comments, and I think I'll direct them all to what we have as option C. And I am curious about just the flipping of the layout so that the building is actually on the promenade. And you made a comment about the circulation of the drive-through, but in option C, it would seem that the circulation of the drive-through would work in either direction. It's not necessarily tied to a right turn movement because of the position of the drive-up canopy and tellers.
So, Mr. Flipson, do you have option C that you could lay out there for us so we can at least, as Commissioner Schroeder is talking about it?
Well, it seems once the tellers, the drop-off, whatever you call those things where you put the tubes, are removed from the building, you have much more flexibility in which direction the cars exit after their transaction is completed. So in flipping to the other side of the site, they could be making a left turn movement and exiting through the parking lot. And then you'd actually have the parking lot next to the access road, which across, if I remember correctly from the Byerly's project, this facade at the street level of this building is not all that attractive. So putting parking lots next to the unattractive portions of the Byerly's development might be better than putting parking next to our promenade. The other thing I wonder about is just you've looked at trying to keep it out of the front yard setback. Our ordinances actually allow for relief in front yard setbacks for creating pedestrian-oriented environment, activating the street, and it seems with the location of the doors and the plaza that you have in this scheme, you're doing that. But you've kept the building back probably 16 feet past the building to the west, so your building, which actually might be more attractive than the building on the Byerly site, is hidden from people who are moving eastbound on Hazleton. It seems like it should be pulled up at least equal to the building at the Byerly site, if not further to the north. I think your building is interesting, it's nicely scaled, and I would think moving it away from that tall building and closer to the street actually does a lot for the prominence of the building. I'm not so concerned about parking along the Byerly's access road. I am concerned about what happens with parking along the promenade.
From a circulation standpoint, in a design of a financial institution, this option C is what's called a head-on drive-up, and they are the least preferred because the customer is so far away from the building. Also, you can just barely see this little dot. That's called a night deposit. For security reasons, you have to have the night deposit in the building. And so a car would have to drive up, make a tight radius to get to that night depository. It is doable. For what it's worth, our company specializes in financial institutions. We've done over 1,800 in our history. And this is not the preferred route. But again, when we were doing options, we thought, well, let's look at this depending on the comments we hear tonight. You are correct. If a head-on was done, you could go left or right, answering one of your questions. And one concern we would have is if we took this building, and if I'm hearing correctly, this is the corner of the property, the adjacent apartment. The more we slide this building up, the more this curb slides up. So even if we slid it up 20 feet, we're losing more parking stalls right at the building. You still have parking over here. So not a great excuse not to do it, but we probably have, in this concept, 10 parking stalls. We'd probably be 8 right next to the building if we slid the whole building up.
Well, I think
there's other, again.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Commissioner Schroeder, but I think you're also suggesting up and then to the east.
Yeah, here and over.
You might have the same implications about parking distribution around the site. Frankly, I look at it from the location of the building relative to other things we're trying to achieve with our promenade and with other recently developed improvements in the area.
Commissioner Platter.
So just a couple things here, and kind of to agree with Commissioner Schroeder on that. I think the building should, for the most part, go in the northeast corner of this site, and the parking should be on the Byerly side versus the promenade. I mean, I looked at these initially and I thought, holy cow, look at all the parking they're putting on the promenade, and that just not a good situation is what the city's trying to do with that area. And I get what you're saying about letting people park there, but they could just as easily park on the other side too to get there. So I would agree, you know, some version of Plan C would give the city the flexibility, showing us what you can do on the site, not to make it all the parking along the promenade with those pieces. A couple other things, definitely need the pedestrian access along the south side of the site, however you do that. When I was looking around the site, I saw 4 people walking across the lot holding Byerly's bags going across the promenade to the apartments across there. So that was going on too. And I'll just, you know, landscaping, right? Especially along the promenade. How you're really, not so much just screening, but making it interesting, and how you're showing people, you know, that piece there as you get up toward Hazleton Road. And I thought too, if you go towards Hazleton Road, you get more prominence actually for your building along that street as well. I wouldn't like to see any signage facing the greenway, even if it's horizontal into it, like the one, I forget which rendering shows that, you know, basically showing a big blade sign along the promenade. I wouldn't be in favor of that. I get where you're, you know, to me the majority should be towards Hazleton and the Byerly's piece. I would also support less parking to make some of these things happen. You know, there's parking kind of everywhere around here if it comes up, or there needs to be overflow. And I'll just say I'm kind of disappointed this isn't part of the Byerly site as well. That all could have worked in together, but maybe you've got what you got. But it's disappointing to see this come in as essentially an orphan property that doesn't quite fit with the rest of the vision for this site here. So those are my comments. Thanks for bringing it in for sketch plan. I hope you're getting what you need and giving us a chance to kind of work through this too. Is such a, you know, it really is a fairly prominent area now with the promenade and everything that's going on around it. So thanks for that.
Commissioner Carr.
Just 2 additional comments. I know I'm fairly satisfied with your option B, if there's lots of landscaping to screen it from the promenade. But one concept was brought up about perhaps the setback for the building should be the same as what is for the Byerly's building across the road. There'd be some continuity. Otherwise, this is set back. You're not going to see the building. I don't know if it could be moved up towards Hazleton. That might affect the parking issues. Just a thought. I think from a streetscape standpoint, having the buildings in alignment might be more attractive. And then the other thing, being a member of the Living Streets Advisory Group, if you can give any thoughts to bike racks put on the property.
Think already does bike racks at their banks.
They do. Okay, good. Okay, thank you.
In response to the, you know, our first plan, you know, don't ask why B is our first choice. Just leave it up to an architect. But in discussions with the staff, the rationale to see A and C about moving the building, and, you know, we saying the planning commission might agree to a variance, but because they felt you might say what you're saying, moving the building up farther to the north on the property. So then that's how these other couple options evolved.
Commissioner Fisher.
A few comments, and I don't want you to take this personally, or, you know, the bank to take it personally. It's, you know, if I look at this as a proposed bank development, you know, I guess it's fine. But I go back to what Commissioner Platter was talking about. You know, I'm kind of bummed about what we've done as a city, or haven't done, to kind of be more proactive. You know, we have this big Byerly's development going on right next to this. And one of my comments would be in that regard is that this is out of context, in that it doesn't show any context. So it might be helpful, even with your discussion, I'm assuming you're going to take this and have a sketch, are you going to do the sketch plan review with the council, are you thinking? I'm a big into context, and this is like designed, I mean, even your renderings it's like a flat platform with nothing on any side. And it's hard for me, I wasn't here when we approved the Byerly's development, so I'm trying to figure out how it's just being built right now, and yet I don't know how this works with that. And the way this really, I get there's a property line here, and this is a piece of property, and you want to develop a bank on it. I get that. But what's really happening here is there's a system of pedestrian movement, of vehicular movement. All of these things are happening in an absolutely key piece of the city with this infrastructure investment. And when you look at it from that perspective, I see a bank with a parking lot. And I see you've made an attempt to connect to the promenade. But when I was looking at the packet, I was like, oh man, a little sidewalk crossing a parking lot. That's not at all the vision. And so the disappointment for me, and you can't do anything about this, but I just have to say it, is that we've missed a huge opportunity. And so we got to somehow make it as good as we can. And I would agree that, I would be one that would favor a variance to have less parking, especially if you don't need it. We shouldn't force parking to happen. That shouldn't happen. I really would like to see this thing flip somehow and make the parking happen on the west side. And, moving the building so it's welcoming from the promenade and all of these other, I think Commissioner Schroeder hit on a lot of those points. And somehow making the connection for pedestrians, and again, I don't even know what happens when they cross on the west side, where they are in the Byerly's development. But assuming that they can move through that or to that, figure out a way where they don't have to cross parking, that they can just do that smoothly. So thanks for letting me rant a little bit on.
That's fine. All feedback is good here.
Commissioner Carr.
I do think that seeing it in context with the Byerly's development helps us understand. So, for example, you're proposing a sidewalk. I don't know where that takes you in relationship to the Byerly's development, but I don't know if you could do that or Carrie could do that or the two of you could work together so that when we see this, we see streetscapes of the Byerly's development with this development and various views from different streets and how the properties connect.
Commissioner Grable.
To echo what Commissioner Fisher said, don't take this personally, but starting with Target and the restaurant and retail development south of this, this is going to be one more disappointment in that area.
Commissioner Carr.
I don't think it has to be a disappointment. I think that we can, again, I think you've got the feedback, but I think that really those comments that you've received tonight and our desire to integrate it with the surrounding property could perhaps influence your design and placement of the building.
We're definitely willing to work with staff.
Commissioner Forrest.
Yeah, I concur with my fellow commissioners about most of what's been said here, and I agree that it would be nice to shift it to the northeast and have your parking more on the west and just orienting it in a different direction somehow. The landscaping, the buffer between the promenade and the building and the parking is really important, and also the transition so that you aren't going on the promenade and, whoa, there's that big building right there. Because especially if you do move it to the northeast, it would be nice that it be sensitive that the side face, have your big splash on the other side and directed toward the car traffic that way, but yet have some welcoming green space paths, whatever, to access the building perhaps, and maybe no drive or anything on that along the east side of the building, but it might be possible to get a lot of the same configuration as option B, maybe shifting the ATMs further west or something, and still keep the building in the northeast. And so, yeah, the big thing for me is going to be a lot of how, as it was said, the context and how it fits in. It's a great opportunity to do something that's really sensitive and appropriate, so don't miss the opportunity. Thank you.
Commissioner Kilberg.
I can echo all the comments that have already been said about parking facing the promenade, the orientation of the building in the northeast. I would commend that, again, that the sidewalk goes along the south side of the lot. Considering that access road that's a dead end there, correct? It just splits right and left. It eliminates having to cross the street at that point. You can just continue onto the sidewalk. I would say, again, echo the less parking, more green space aspect of it. I also see the missed opportunity in connecting with the promenade. I feel I like the design on the second floor, trying to bring that green space, tearing it down into the promenade. When I think Commissioner Schroeder brought up connecting your patio or your front area more towards Hazleton and towards the promenade on that area, and I would actually like to see something other than a bank. And I don't know if you've considered a combined use on this property, whether it be a retail or fast casual restaurant or something like that. But I feel there's a large buildable area on this property, and I'm not saying I want to use it all, but I'm saying that maybe if you're considering a bank, which I don't think is bad, you can also consider maximizing the use of the property, tying it in with buyer lease, bringing people off that promenade and not off that Hazleton sidewalk for another reason also.
Commissioner Platter.
Maybe you said this, but how many stalls were you, I think you show 47 because that's what the city requires, but how many were you thinking from, if you could do whatever you want here? Just a ballpark.
Since the drawings that you've received, the building footprint has shrunk somewhat. So the main level is 5,100 and the upper level is approximately 3,400. So the overall, if you can, I'll pull it down here, maybe you can zoom in, and we're saying at 8,400 square feet. So with 8,400 square feet, we only need 42 stalls to comply with the ordinance. Now, having said that, if we go back to even this option, you take these 9 out down here, gets us down to 33. That's still plenty of parking stalls. So if we use somewhere between 30 and 33 stalls, that's probably realistic for what the bank will need.
All right, thank you.
But those stalls aren't the problem. It's the stalls on the east side of the building that's the problem.
But if it's just the count, yes, you're correct.
And it seems to me if if those are green space, then it's easy enough to do the proof of parking, because if it ends up being a problem, it's not a big task to undo it. Any other comments? All right, I would echo many of the comments that were made. I think what you're hearing from us is particularly with respect to how you address Hazleton and how you address the promenade. We'd prefer to try and keep the parking off of the promenade if we can, and get you to get your building a little more prominence by being closer to Hazleton. And if you can make that work with your circulation issues, I think that would be maximizing the opportunity that you have here. Commissioner Forrest.
I don't like the look of the drive-throughs and all that, but that's a reality anyway. But I do think that the use for a bank there's some advantages to that too. It's a quieter use than retail. It can, if they can engage the public in some way, or at least be a pleasant experience to pass through that area, it's great. But it's not like there's going to be cars at the same rush hours and stuff like that. Well, I won't say not the same rush hours, but it's a fairly quiet use compared to a lot of other potential uses for the area.
They will also be having, on the second floor, they're going to have a small, depending on how you want to, either a business center or a community center that could hold 20 people to 25 people. So that is for community use, not just for them. So they will try to invite some of the different smaller businesses that may need to use a conference room from time to time, or they might have events on that upper level for different organizations.
Commissioner Platter.
Just one last comment, and it's kind of been touched on, but I want to just echo it for sure, is that, this comes in as I know Edina is a suburb, but in this area, we don't really want to be as much of a suburb in this area. So think of that when you go into this, and how is it more of an urban site along with that, less parking, hopefully more walk up, all those types of things. So don't just think of it as it's a parcel out in the middle of nowhere either. There's all these other things going along with it, and you've heard a lot of it here tonight as to where we want to be, not where maybe we were in this area. So thank you.
Good feedback, and we will work with staff on trying to answer most, all of your comments. Side note, our office used to be on France Avenue between 69th and 70th. We were there in the 70s, and in the late 80s, I used to go from there over to this restaurant when it was a restaurant in the 80s and 90s. So it's been sitting empty, I believe, for quite a while. So I would guess the city is happy that it is some developments occurring there. So we'll try to do our best to address your concerns.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Flipson. All right, the next item we have on reports and recommendations is our work plan for 2014. We met in a work session before our last meeting and had a discussion about various items that have been on our mind in terms of things we want to try and accomplish. I thought it was a very productive discussion, both in terms of itemizing the things that we think are important for the Commission to address and trying to organize them in some fashion. And Carrie, you've done a nice job of capturing, I think, what we talked about in the draft work plan that is in front of us this evening. To give folks who are watching an overview, we realize that there are several different categories of tasks that we want to try and tackle in addition to our ongoing response to applications that come before us. And they really fall into 4 different categories. The first is zoning ordinance amendments, and we've listed 4 items within that: sign plan ordinance, parking regulations, specifically how much parking any given property ought to have, like the issue we were just talking about now. Minimum or maximum size for apartments and senior housing. Our code currently has some maximum sizes, and we're wondering about whether that still makes sense. And then some lighting and noise regulations. In our discussions, we felt like those were items that staff could take the lead in looking at what other cities are doing, what the kind of state of the art is in terms of land use regulation on these areas, and bring to the Commission some recommendations and some information and research that would let us do some noodling on whether we ought to make recommendations for changes to the existing zoning code. The second category that we came up with were policy recommendations, and there's really 3 broad categories of items that we've included in this. The first is sustainability, pedestrian friendliness, and affordable housing, and we have wrestled with this in the planned unit development applications we've received. We've been asking applicants for planned unit development approval in exchange for the city's flexibility on its zoning regulations, to provide the city with some enhanced sustainability features, enhanced pedestrian friendliness features, and assistance in helping the city reach its goals in terms of affordable housing. What we have found is that applicants are telling us that they don't know what the target is and would like some guidance about that. And so I think in response to that, we should be looking at making some policy statements, and that's going to take a little bit of work for us to have some discussions about that and come up with some recommendations as to what we'd like to see. So that is one item. The second item is some work on tree preservation, the urban forest, so to speak. We do not have a tree preservation ordinance. We have had some subdivisions that have come in front of us. We've been fortunate enough that some folks have voluntarily agreed to some conservation easements on those properties to protect some trees, but we really don't have an ability to protect wholesale removal of trees in the city. And I think over the years that I've been on the Planning Commission, we've had enough conversation on this topic that this is an area we'd like to at least drill into and consider whether we want to adopt any amendments to our zoning code. And then the final area is what we've labeled on the work plan as a midterm comprehensive plan consideration. The city's kind of most basic planning tool is the comprehensive plan, and every 10 years we're obligated to update that comprehensive plan. We last did that in 2008 or 2009, and we've had some discussions about the importance of kind of continuing to examine that. We're not going to have to update it again until 2018 or 19, but especially with the collective experience and wisdom that we have on the Planning Commission, we thought that it would be a good time to kind of review how our comprehensive plan is addressing our city as our city continues to change. And, you know, as a small example, compared to 2007 when we were looking at the comprehensive plan the last time, the whole notion of light rail transit is much more real possibility. It's not planned to come directly through Edina, but it's going to come close. And so that's an example of something that we should do some thinking about, how that would impact how we might be planning in the future. And there's a number of other examples. I know Commissioner Platter and Commissioner Carr are on the Living Streets, part of that Living Streets effort, and they would be, those are examples of things that we can update as well. Commissioner Platter, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, I just wanted to, when I was thinking about the policy recommendations, and maybe it's not a thing we're actively seeking, but I'm throwing this out there. Should it also be stated that we are essentially monitoring what was just done with the residential ordinances, for example, and understanding if, you know, what is happening, do modifications need to be made, or are there other things coming up? And I think there's certainly some discussions going on about that right now. I believe City will be here, is it next meeting?
I think that's right.
On the ordinance changes?
Well, on
our residential construction officer is going to come visit us.
She'll be at the next meeting.
Yeah, and so
you know, what comes out of that, I think, and I'm not saying there's necessarily anything to do, but I think it should be there as a prompt to, you know, monitor that throughout and see if there's anything else that comes up.
Yeah, certainly we've just finished a considerable amount of work on looking at zoning amendments that can address residential redevelopment, and one of the policy, I think it's a good suggestion that we be kind of looking at how that's playing out once it gets adopted. The council did adopt much of what we recommended, and seeing how that is actually working, if it's accomplishing the objectives that we set out to accomplish, is a good idea. So those are really the policy areas. The other two areas we really recognize that we do a lot of work communicating with other city efforts or being part of other city efforts. I mentioned that Commissioner Carr and Commissioner Platter are part of the city's effort to implement a living streets policy. Commissioner Schroeder and Commissioner Fisher and I have been working on the Grandview redevelopment efforts and visioning process. And there are also efforts going on with the France Avenue corridor planning. And in fact, the city of Minneapolis is working on some small area planning in the 44th and France area that borders Edina, and that might be another area that we might have some liaison communication with. So our third category is really making sure we're staying connected with other city efforts that planning is really a big part of. And then finally, the Grandview effort that I mentioned as part of the liaison category started out as a small area plan, which is contemplated by our comprehensive plan. And one of the things we talked about was trying to initiate a small area plan of some type for the Valley View Wooddale area, which is a smaller area than the Grandview area, but still an important commercial node that there is some hint of redevelopment activity that might happen there, and we thought it might be a good time to start to engage that neighborhood with perhaps some leadership from the Planning Commission, but putting together a working group that might conduct kind of a small area plan in that area. So that's a good overview. The only thing I would say is we've kind of repeated that small area plan on the second page, Carrie. I'm not sure that we need to have it in both places. So we could take it out of that second page. And I think Commissioner Platter's suggestion to add a fourth item to the policy recommendations about monitoring progress and implementation of the residential redevelopment standards might be a good one to kind of keep on our plate as well. Any suggestions from the Commission of things? Is this accurately reflecting the general consensus we discussed at our last meeting? Anything else that you'd like to add to this? From a timing perspective, the City Council is having its work plan work session on October 1st, which just happens to be next Tuesday. And so Commissioner Platter and I will go and deliver word of this to the City Council. I'll tell you that it is quite a meeting when you go into this meeting with all of the boards and commissions in the city delivering their work plans to the Council. I think last year we got a total of 7 minutes to summarize the work that we're planning to do for the next year. So it'll be a brief presentation. All right, I don't see any other suggestions of additions at this point. Commissioner Carr?
One other comment on the policy recommendations. I know that there are no hours listed. It says, yes, staff support is required. I know you haven't allocated any hours to that. Do you intend to allocate some hours?
Yes, anything that you need, we would do. But we certainly can put some hours to that. Being that it was more the policy form, once it gets to the ordinance stage, where we would be writing and any staff support.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Carrie, but I assume that staff support hours is kind of a tool that Scott and staff are trying to use to try to you add up all these work plans and see if you have enough hours in the year to accomplish these things.
Correct.
I do think the zoning ordinance amendments, we are looking for staff to take more of a lead on that and then bring those things back to us, whereas I think that some of the policy discussions are probably going, well, we'll look to you for some support on that. They're probably going to originate here at the Commission, and there'll be direction that comes from that. All right, further comments? All right, so hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve this as our 2014 work plan as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, good work. And we will report back after our visit with the council next Tuesday. So next up on the agenda is the correspondence and petitions. I think there's not a council connection, or is there? Was there a council connection? There's a council connection. There is also a summary from City Manager Neal of recent activities as well that is on the in your packets. And if anyone has any comments on those, I'm happy to entertain those. There is also the latest version of the attendance sheet, so you can examine that in those wee hours of the evenings when you can't get to sleep. Commissioner Scheer.
I did have one question about that. Was our 9/11 meeting considered a work session?
9/11 meeting.
That was the. Are you referring
the
to
work
the
plan meeting?
Oh no,
it was not.
No.
Okay.
Oh, the before our regular meeting.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think that was a separate meeting that would have been listed on here. All right, so then next up is Chair and Commission member comments. I have a few items that I wanted to cover. First of all, I want to welcome Taylor Halva. She is our newest student member and is with us for the first time this evening. Taylor, I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you to just say a few words about yourself, where you're in school, and what gave you the idea to come and join us for this coming year.
Well, hi, thank you for welcoming me. I'm a junior at the high school, and I got the idea from my counselor because I've gotten to know her, and she thinks that this experience would be really great for me. And so far, I really enjoy it. It is, so.
Well, great. We'll continue to encourage you to chime in with your opinion. Commissioner Kilberg did a fine job tonight on the sketch plan, and we really value having that input. So, welcome.
Thank you.
Next, I wanted to talk. We did have a work session scheduled originally with the city attorney this evening, and something came up, and he was not able to be here. So. I'd like to work with Carrie to reschedule a time for that. I apologize that we weren't able to make that happen tonight. There are, seems like a mounting list of issues that we'd like to pick his brain about. So we will work to try and reschedule something, hopefully in the not too distant future. I would note also that on your desk tonight was a card announcing an open house, a couple of open houses for the Pentagon Park. I don't know if we call it revitalization, they call it. You may recall that they were in front of us a couple of meetings ago, I think, telling us a little bit about how they're trying to revitalize Pentagon Park in the short term while they're thinking about longer term redevelopment. So there is an open house tomorrow evening from 6:30 to 8, or October 10 from 6:30 to 8. Then I would ask just that perhaps Commissioner Fisher, who is the co-chair of the latest Grandview Community Advisory Team, if you have anything to share with us about the status of our work on that project.
So you caught me off guard. Couldn't prepare my speech. We just met the other night again, and we're really just getting going as a committee, and our focus is, of course, redeveloping the public works site in the context of the greater framework. So, our question immediately was the dealing with the public space. Like, how are we going to wait to figure out what's happening with that before we really move forward? And so there's a lot of question about that, but I think we got good direction from the council. And we are moving forward with a survey that's going to go out to the community, and we're going to, using consultants to do that. But at the same time, we're moving forward on creating the request for interest from developers. And the key that I want everyone to understand is we're looking for a developer partner, not a developer to come and just propose one thing and here's the best price and here we go. It's not about that. It's about finding a partner that's going to work with the city, it's our property, to find the best, the best answer for that site within the bigger context. So I think we're off to a pretty good start. We're asking lots of questions early, getting to know each other as a committee, but I think we're off and running.
I also want to personally commend Commissioner Fisher, who you may all recall left us last January, and it's been quite a retirement from your public role. So now you're co-chairing this committee, as well as we've sucked you back into being on the Planning Commission. So.
Yeah, I noticed the sequence of that. As soon as I signed on to be the co-chair of that, then all of a sudden that's fine.
We're lucky to have you, so thanks for continuing to engage. Commissioner Platter and Commissioner Carr, anything to report on the Living Streets efforts?
Our next meeting is next Wednesday, and the person there that is I forget the name of the company. Name of the company, but they've hired a firm to help them reach out to the community and do other things as they go along with that policy. So we're going to hear from her and what her ideas are and how that can work out. So that'll be next Wednesday for that.
Great. Commissioner Carr.
Yes, it was our last meeting. We had our first meeting, and there's going to be 12 meetings. It's going to take a year to develop the plan. We're going to go through stages of the plan and get feedback from this advisory group. The first meeting, we just generally talked about what our objectives were. We introduced ourselves. We, again, talked about the yearly plan. And we looked at some of the Living Streets models. Los Angeles has a template that's been designed that's quite wonderful. It's very long, but it's quite interesting. They talk all about living streets, what the components are of living streets, slowing traffic down, sidewalks, trees, the water issues. But again, it's quite comprehensive. There's many elements to a living street plan, and we've got good staff support. And the staff is actually going to be drafting the plan in sections, and then the advisory group will be giving them feedback.
Is the plan for that are you developing a plan that would become part of the comprehensive plan?
It's TBD exactly where that lands. That was one of the options we discussed. But, is it an ordinance, is part of the comp plan, or is it a guideline? That's kind of TBD at this point.
Yeah, the discussion we had was we believe that in most cities it's considered a guideline because there's too many variables and too fact specific, but it was to be determined.
And I would say that one of the tasks that we have on the Grandview committee is figuring out the transportation infrastructure in that area, and the framework that was adopted in 2012 is certainly committed to being more pedestrian friendly and having streets that provide a role for multimodal transportation, not just vehicles. Commissioner Carr or perhaps Commissioner Schroeder, anything new on the France Avenue corridor work? Okay, that's at the same place. All right, so that's all I have. If there's other commission member comments? Staff comments?
I could provide a little more detail from the last council meeting.
Sure.
They took action on several recommendations from the Planning Commission. The first is the zoning ordinance, the second part of that. You may recall that they were considering taking out your recommendation on the side yard setback. That has been put back in you have an alternative now. You can go by the current ordinance and the required setbacks and having to step in. If you don't want to use that part of the side yard requirement, you can use the alternative that you had recommended. So you have a choice on a side yard setback now for lots between 50 and 75 feet in width. So hopefully the goal here is to get some different design alternatives for new houses that go up. So that will take effect, that part of the ordinance for the setbacks, building height, that'll take effect on January 1st. Other items that they considered the sketch plan for Wicks. They echoed a lot of the comments that you had for them, concern primarily on the Richfield side, suggested maybe putting more density and height toward York, and just some general concerns about the density. The comments were somewhat similar as the Planning Commission. They also reviewed the Southdale Medical expansion. They did not take action. They asked for the applicant to come back and address a lot of the conditions that were suggested in your motion at the last meeting. Some of those include separating the car trips from the loading area. Somehow, if they can do that during the day, it could be a temporary bollard, so they're going to come back with some ideas. We haven't seen that yet. They had a lot of concern over the look of the parking ramp, so they suggested that they come back with some better exterior treatments on essentially all sides. And then they echoed the concern over the hours of the loading and to restrict that for the larger trailers to more nighttime type of activities. They required some public art in the turnaround. They increased the landscaping along Drew and along 66. They wanted to see some more mature landscaping. So adding all of those conditions and suggestions, and the goal was for them to come back at the next city council meeting. The last item is, maybe some of you had saw the Met Council projections for Edina for 2040 were released last week. And so this is something that we'll take up as part of the comprehensive plan discussions, but they're projecting that Edina's population grows from, currently it's just under 48,000, but would grow to 70,000 in the year 2040. That's an addition of 10,000 housing units within the next 25 years. That's all the comments I have.
Not without Cahill Gardens. Just saying.
It's the next small area plan, large area plan.
Do they
Commissioner
project
Planner.
where they would be in any way, or?
No.
No, they don't, okay.
Go ahead.
Hey, Carrie, just on the ordinance, so they passed the height, right? And there was no options on that.
No options on that. That's reduced from 35 feet to the ridge line down to 30 feet.
Okay, and then the side wall articulation, was that passed as well?
That was.
So there's no options on that?
No
too?
options on that.
Got it. Thank you.
So the option is just if you want to avoid the step in at the second floor, then you got to live with the new setback regulations. Okay. All right. Other comments from staff? Okay. Any other comments from the commission? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you.
Yeah, he is.